Hey, it's NPR's Book of the Day. I'm Andrew Limbong. Today on the pod, we've got Morgan Talty. His debut novel, Fire Exit, has gotten glowing reviews from the LA Review of Books, the New York Times, and us at NPR. It's a book that centers around this question of blood quantum. That is, how Indigenous Americans trace their heritage, their bloodline, to show how native they are. It's a complicated and contentious issue, and Talty chose to make it even more complicated by having a white man be the protagonist of this story. We had a great chat and talked a bit about his own blood quantum with regards to his son. But first, I want to play you this interview he did with NPR a few years prior, when his short story collection, Night of the Living Rez, came out. Then he spoke with NPR's Melissa Block about balancing representing the Penobscot people without putting his own characters in a box. That's coming up after the break.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Hulu, presenting Diane von Furstenberg, Woman in Charge, which tells the inspiring story of the iconic trailblazer known by her initials DVF. Child of a Holocaust survivor, princess by marriage, founder of a fashion brand, and philanthropist, Diane von Furstenberg continues to inspire and empower women around the globe. Featuring interviews with Oprah Winfrey, Marc Jacobs, Hillary Rodham Clinton, and more, Diane von Furstenberg, Woman in Charge, is now streaming on Hulu.
A woman leaves her husband, takes their young son, and returns to the small Penobscot Indian Island Reservation in Maine. She takes up with a volatile alcoholic. And through the 12 interconnected short stories in Morgan Talty's new book, Night of the Living Rez, we witness how life unspools as her boy grows up.
Riding over the bridge to the island, I sensed that even though their problems were their own, there was no escaping how those problems shaped us all. No escaping the end. Like the way the ice melts in the river each spring, overflowing and creeping up the grassy banks and over lawns, reaching farther and farther toward the houses until finally the water touched stone, seeping inside and flooding basements, insulation swelling, drying only when the water has receded. But what remained was a smell, a reminder that the water had come and risen up and would rise again in time.
The narrator, David, nicknamed D, has his own problems, addiction among them. On the reservation, there's never enough money, there's more than enough trauma, and just enough love and wry humor to make it through. Night of the Living Rez is Morgan Talty's first book. He's a citizen of the Penobscot Nation, and he grew up on the island in Maine.
I think of the reservation or the Penobscot Nation here as this sort of space that gives these characters some definition, some sense of indigeneity, right? There's a moment where Dee is off the reservation and he's with Fellis at a hospital where Fellis is getting treatments, and the janitor, says something to Dee to the effect of, "Oh, you're Penobscot." And Dee said, "I didn't know how he knew I was Penobscot." And then he realized he was wearing a shirt that said Penobscot.
It's kind of a tell, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So for Dee, and I think for a lot of Indigenous people, there's this, how do you express your indigeneity, in a way that is not feeding into what people think Indigenous people look like and behave and act like. And so the island, in the book is really this place where these people, draw their sense of indigeneity. And when they leave, it may feel like it's missing.
The narrator in these stories is David as a boy, and later as he gets older, we know him as Dee. And it does sound like many of the threads of his family story line up with your own. How much autobiography is woven into these short stories?
Yeah, a fair amount. We look at a story like Safe Harbor, and my mom had passed away last February 2021, and when she was alive, she suffered from severe depression, and she used to go to crisis stabilization units, which are great places for people who are suffering in this way. And one time when I went up there to bring her cigarettes, I watched her have a seizure. It was one of the most frightening things I'd ever seen before. And immediately when I got home, I wrote from the very beginning of Safe Harbor all the way up to the point where she had the seizure. And so it was only later when I felt that urge to be like, I wonder how I can push this story. Did I move forward? And obviously the end of it is did not happen, and I won't give it away. But the stories, there's a lot of moments that are, I think, very similar to my experiences. But I think even thematically, when it comes to themes of alcoholism or addiction, drug addiction, gambling addiction, violence, pain, all of these things, as well as love and happiness and forgiveness. Like, they're all things that I have intense experience with.
All of the characters, it seems to me, in Night of the Living Rez are struggling in some way. There's a lot of pain. And I wonder how, as a writer, you keep that from being unrelenting, just too much to bear, if that factors into how you're writing and what you include.
Yeah, I think I never want to exploit those moments of violence, those moments of intense, struggle. I think to do so is to miss an opportunity to highlight the way we go through it. Because for as much pain and suffering as there is in this book for these characters, I still feel like there is that same level of hope and caring and love and forgiveness for them. It doesn't seem difficult for me to do when writing, I think, just because I'm so very opposed to positioning my work in that way, to get a tear-jerk reaction from something. I want to, try harder. I want to go deeper and further than simply, showing something terrible and then moving on.
Mm. You do also find ways to fold in humor into the stories. And I'm thinking of the first story, which is titled Burn. And there's a scene where the narrator, Dee, finds his friend Fellis, who is drunk, and it's wintertime. He's fallen asleep in a swamp, and his long hair has frozen into the ice. And Dee has to cut his friend's hair to free him. And he later makes a wisecrack to Fellis. What does he say?
He says, "I never thought I'd scalp a fellow tribal member." I mean, I thought that line was absolutely hilarious. And I'm like, did I write that? Because I feel like the moment you try to be funny is the moment you're not funny. But just the image of doing that, the cutting the hair and the connotation it has or would have had, 100, 200, 300 years ago compared to now, right? But it was just such a funny moment. I could not say so. I could not say something.
And to try to turn that into something funny, something benign.
Yeah.
When you think about your identity as a Penobscot author and the stories that you want to tell, how do you weigh that responsibility of the portrait that you paint and maybe your responsibility to the tribe?
I feel a strong sense of responsibility and pride in being able to write about Penobscot people and my ancestors and these characters for a mainstream audience that I think is usually used to getting Indigenous stories that seem familiar to them. And I feel like this collection might feel a little unfamiliar, but also familiar in the way that these characters are human, much like everybody else is. Their past histories and their culture is there as sort of an extra defining factor for them. And so I never try to cast these characters as representative of a specific culture. They're more just a sliver of it.
That's Morgan Talty. His debut collection of stories is titled Night of the Living Rez. Morgan, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Melissa.
This message comes from Apple Pay. Everyone knows that credit card numbers can be stolen. But you know what's harder to steal? Your face. With Apple Pay, your purchases are authenticated by you thanks to Face ID, making your smile your signature. Just double-click, smile, and tap. With each tap, your card number and your purchases stay secured. Pay the Apple way with your compatible device anywhere contactless payment is accepted. Support for NPR and the following message come from the Wallace Foundation, working to develop and share practices that can improve learning and enrichment for young people and the vitality of the arts for everyone. Ideas and information at wallacefoundation.org.
The biggest structural problem Talty had when trying to figure out how to write his debut novel, Fire Exit, was the point of view. He took a couple different cracks at it, including a sort of third-person omniscient narrator, but ultimately settled on Charles Lamazwe, a white guy, at the center of a very native story. So Charles is a white man who grew up on the reservation because his mom married his stepfather, Frederick, right? And Charles sort of ages out, right, when he's 18 because he, isn't native. But now lives nearby across the river. And the book starts with him watching his grown daughter, like Elizabeth. But the fact that he is her father is kept secret because Elizabeth's mother, Mary, wants to keep her native, right? What is it that Mary is trying to do for Elizabeth by hiding her identity?
It's a great question, and it's one that I posed myself. And I kind of was like, refused to answer it in my own way, in my own mind. And like, this is where I become like the writer who's like, oh, I just pose questions, but like, I'm not trying to look for answers, but like, that's exactly it. What is she trying? Like, what is her reasoning for it? And I think the answer could be multifaceted, right? There could be a number of reasons why. One, I think she wants her daughter to be a citizen. She like legally, right? Like, think about how many, people who come to the United States and want to be citizens, right? And imagine what a parent will do and has done in order to make their child a citizen of the United States, right? And what that affords them, right? You can think, I think we hear about it all the time, right? Like, and so I think there's a little bit of that at play here. Mary is like, oh, I want my child not to be like referred to as, oh, like, yeah, you're native, but you're not really native because you're not like a citizen, or, oh yeah, you only have healthcare until you're 18, or something like that, or like that sort of stuff. So I think in her mind, Mary's like, I don't want her to be that. I think, and the other thing is like, there's also racism involved, which I kind of hinted at too, growing up. I mean, when I was little, we used to, or my friends used to fight over who was more native. And it came down to looking at the percentage book. And then we got older and we realized it was bullshit,
Yeah. The question of Elizabeth's identity isn't abstract because the Penobscot Nation uses the math of your lineage, your blood quantum, to decide if you are an enrolled member. Now, blood quantum has a long history. Different tribes use it in different ways, and there are complicated feelings about its efficacy. But for Talty, there's something frustratingly arbitrary about it. Sorry if this is a stupid question, but when we say like blood quantum, right, are people like drawing blood and sending it to a lab or something? Or is this just like on paper tracing?
It's just on paper. Like, it's literally like there's no actual blood involved. I should lie and start saying like, yeah, every year I got to go in and get my blood drawn. And no, it's literally just on paper. So like, for example, when we became federally recognized, we adopted the blood quantum, and it was like, all right, everybody now who is on the rolls and has been documented since forever, you're at 100%. You have 100% native blood. So like my grandma had 100% native blood. And then she had children with a non-native, and so her children were then half. So that's the way we did it. And so my mom was half, or 50%. And then my mom had me with my dad, who was Irish. And so now I'm a quarter, right? And so that's how we do it. But there's no actual blood drawn. It's just on paper. But then, like, if a tribe is close to extinction, we can just say, oh, okay, well, let's increase it. So in 10 years, 20, 30 years from now, I could be considered 100%, But what that does is it opens the floodgates of all of these descendants and other people, and you don't know how many are actually out there.
But Charles knows he's not native, and yet he has some feelings of ownership, or at least association with a native identity. I asked Talty to read a section early on when Charles tries to circle that square.
There's nothing strange about a white person wishing to be Indian. It's comical, if anything. And white people saying they're Indian happens all the time, and it's laughed at by native people. Oh yeah? Your great-great-grandmother was an Indian princess? Boy, here's your per capita then. And I get it. I do. I'm not Skeejan, not native, and I can't say with any pride that I'm Penobscot, because I contain no blood connecting me to ancestors long ago. But I feel that I am, or that I have a stake in their experience. I don't feel this way because I grew up on a reservation. To think that the reservation is what makes an Indian is to massacre all over again the natives who do not populate it. I could have grown up with my mother and Frederick in a city, or in a country town, or, hell, in a dirty, wet sewer, and I'd still feel this way. No. No place makes a native a native. it strengthens it, I'll say that, but it's not the deciding factor.
So, if not blood or place, then what is the deciding factor?
I think it's, culture definitely is the big thing, right? But, a question I've always asked is, it's like, what does it mean to be Native? Because we've been put in this very strange situation where it's like, one, we've had a lot of losses, right? Language, for example, it's been revitalized, for example. So we have language, we have, dances, we have songs, we have traditional stories, we have ways of behaving, acting, that are traditional, but then we also have to think about them as they are now, right? So we're constantly having to contest with trying to grab what we lost or was stolen from us while trying to look forward. It's like driving a car and trying to like get something out of the back seat, and like it's a dangerous thing. And so what makes somebody, Penobscot, in this book, I don't have an answer, is because it's like we have been so screwed over by federal Indian law and policy that we have lost ourselves. And it's not our fault, right, that have been put in this situation. And I would never point to any tribe and be like, you guys did this and it's your hole, you dug your grave. No, we didn't do it to ourselves. We were confused and tricked into doing it, right? And so I don't know, like it's a cultural thing, but what is Penobscot culture? What does it mean to carry it, right? What does it mean to pass it down? What does it mean to show it or express it? How
do you know you're Native, right?
Yeah,
it goes back to that. Yeah, I was reading this article that you published in Esquire about your son. And it's funny. I was in the original draft of this question. It's like, oh, so your son won't be Penobscot, but it's like that's not true. He just won't be part of like the club, right? Part of the in group, right?
Yeah.
So how have you been thinking about passing the culture down to him?
Yeah, well, it's funny. It's like, because I think my last answer was like, I don't know if we know what our culture is. And now here we are. It's like, how do we pass it? I use, as much language as I know, with him. I've told him in English, just like stories of like Gluskab or Gluskabe, who is this cultural hero. And of course he's not going to remember it. But like, the more you do it, I think the more as they get older, they'll, grow into it. But that's one thing I'm going to do. And one, we don't live on the reservation, so it's not like I can drop him off at the community center and he can do, stuff there. But there's an organization called Wabanaki Public Health in Bangor, and they're a nonprofit, and they're actually building it's already there. It's a 4-story building I think they bought, and they're turning it into a huge cultural center. And I'm pretty sure you'll be able to bring your kids there, and Native and non-Native, and Native and non-Native, I think, as a means to bring people closer together. But hopefully by the time he's 3 or 4, that's in place, and I'll be like, see you, Charlie, as I fly off, and he's there, learning stuff, and doing basket making, and all the stuff I did growing up. And if I have to drive out all the way to the res, which is only 35 minutes away, to do it, I'll do it, because he's Penobscot, he's Native. I don't care what number they assign him or how they see him. And if they ever try to kick him off past the 10 o'clock curfew line, I'll be like, talk to me about it, officer. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think Fire Exit is sort of in the tradition of great small town books. And, is it wrong to assume this book takes place in the same world, in the same MCU style universe as Night of the Living Rez, right?
Yeah, I would say it takes place in the same place. Yep.
Yeah. And so can you talk to me about just building your own little Yakima County here?
Yeah. So the Penobscot Nation itself is the island in the river. In real life isn't that big at all. It's not. And so I have never specified in either of these books how big the island is, which gives me the opportunity to keep building. It's kind of like Minecraft in a way. I can shape the terrain if I go in creative mode or something. And that's sort of, I want to keep it that way because I want to be able to, expand, right? But I also want characters to kind of overlap in a way. And I'm not trying to eventually create a giant, forested metropolitan type, place, but we have the Penobscot River, and we own a bunch of islands that go up there, that are held in trust by the federal government. It's our land, and I'm wouldn't it be cool? I'm just visualizing if we had bridges going to each of these islands, and we just had a whole huge population. It just would be super fascinating to envision a story like that. And I suppose maybe that's what I'm trying to build to, is a larger body of work by the time I hit the silence, as is talked about in the book, or the word that's used to refer to as death. I want to leave behind a body of work that I think has done that, has created, a very big world that feels very connected and very intimate, and everybody knows everybody. I guess I want the best of both worlds.
That was my conversation with Morgan Talty. His debut novel is titled Fire Exit. Go check it out. And that's it for this week on NPR's Book of the Day. I'm Andrew Limbong. The podcast is produced by Isabel Gomez Sarmiento and edited by Megan Sullivan. We'll talk to you next week. Thanks for listening.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Mint Mobile. From the gas pump to the grocery store, inflation is everywhere. So Mint Mobile is offering premium wireless starting at just $15 a month. To get your new phone plan for just $15, go to mintmobile.com/switch. Support for NPR and the following message come from IXL Online. Is your child asking questions on their homework you don't feel equipped to answer? IXL Learning uses advanced algorithms to give the right help to each kid, no matter the age or personality. One subscription gets you everything. One site for all the kids in your home, pre-K to 12th grade. Make an impact on your child's learning. Get IXL now. And NPR listeners can get an exclusive 20% off IXL membership when they sign up today at IXL.com/NPR.